we're moving on. There's no way I'm going to go sequentially through all the Psalms. There's 150 of them. It'd take me 150 years to get through them all. So I'm going to just cherry pick some of my uh, preferred favorite kinds of poems. And the next one is Psalm 15. Excuse me. Man, I'm fighting this crud, whatever it is. I'm going to read the whole poem and then come back and we'll work our way through. Lord, who may dwell in your sacred tent? Who may live on your holy mountain? The one whose walk is blameless, who does what is righteous, who speaks the truth from their heart, whose tongue utters no slander, who does no wrong to a neighbor and casts no slur on others, who despises a vile person but honors those who fear the Lord, who keep an oath even when it hurts, keeps an oath even when it hurts, and does not change their mind, who lends money to the poor without interest, who does not accept a bribe against the innocent. Whoever does these things will never be shaken. There's a lot in that. A lot of good stuff, I think. It's maybe one of the most practical of the Psalms. It's down here on the runway, down here on street level where we live and work and relate. It starts with the two questions. Lord, who may dwell in your sacred tent? When I was a little boy, I thought the answer to that was be a PK, be a preacher's kid. You're going to be down at the church all the time. I mean, more than you want to be, and let's be realistic, more than you need to be. Well, I think that was probably true, but as a boy, I didn't have enough background or experience to make like a very appropriate kind of conclusion about me and my family always being at church. But this is not talking about church. This is talking about a specific location. Now, when David wrote this psalm, he was the author. When he talks about the sacred tent, he's talking about the tabernacle. You remember your Old Testament history that David's deep desire, one of his most compelling desires in all of his life, was to build a temple for the Lord. It would be a permanent structure that would mirror the architecture of the tabernacle. I'm not going to go deeply into it, but just remember there were three sections of the tabernacle, and the tabernacle was a tent, a huge tent, sprawling as far as tents go. It had a courtyard, and then it had the where the altar of burnt offerings stood. And then it had the holy place. There was a table of showbread. There was a lamp there. And then in the Holy of Holies, there was the Ark of the Covenant. And originally in it, there was a pot of manna and the stone tablets on which God had inscribed the 10 words. It had, through the book of Judges, the Ark of the Covenant had been moved around a little bit. It had been captured once that we know of. It that piece of furniture, the Ark of the Covenant, was the most important piece of furniture in all of Israel, because the Jews believed that God's presence settled on what was called the mercy seat, which was essentially the top of the ark. Now, whether or not God's physical presence was always there, I really can't debate. I will say there are problems with debating that. One of the problems is how do you figure out that a God who is everywhere at the same time would be particularly present there on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant? Well, I don't know. But the Jews were firmly convinced that this was, if there was a physical place that you could say, that's where God is, it would be there. And frankly, that's what made the tent sacred. It's a little hard for me, and it might be for you as well, to get the sense that the Hebrew, the Jew of David's day, would have loved to just live there in the tabernacle. That rather than going there and then essentially the main thing, what happened in the tabernacle for a Jew was worship. They would go, present offerings, worship, and then go back home. David said, who may dwell in your sacred tent? Who can live there? Not just visit there. For who can make that their home? We don't, and I don't see this as a big bad thing, but I don't think we can really connect with that. We don't have one physical place like that. Our church, and my wife and I go to a church that it meets in a converted retail space, and then they did a good job with it. But man, it's not like the tabernacle. There's no Ark of the Covenant there. And then he says, who may live on your holy mountain? A couple of things. At first, when I first read this, I thought, oh, that would have to be Mount Zion, where the temple was built. Well, this predates the temple. He might have been talking about that, but it may have been fully symbolic. So wherever God dwells, wherever his presence is, would be the most elevated place on the planet. Now, what does that mean for us? I have, surprise, surprise, I've got a few things I want to say about that. For us today, where is the sacred tent? Where is the holy mountain? Well, in David's day, the presence of God, that's what set those two places apart. Where is God's presence? Where does God live today? And the answer, you know from Sunday school, God dwells in the hearts of believers. So that now I am, you are a tabernacle. I don't know that I can say the tabernacle, but God has chosen to dwell, to live, not to visit, but to take up residency in us. Now, Debbie and I are living the illustration of that right now. We moved, I've told you this, we moved to Las Vegas, which it's coming home for us. And we are living with our daughter Jenny and her husband Garrett. We're not visiting. We may eventually find a house to rent, or if some miracle of God happens, to buy. But for now, we're not just visiting. We're living here. This is our dwelling, our shared dwelling. God, we don't share our physical tent with God. We let him move in. It becomes his. And then we get to live there with him. This is a big idea. How, if you knew that Jesus was going to come to your physical house and not just visit, but he's going to move in, how would you have to do some rearranging? Do you have to get rid of some stuff? If Jesus came physically, walked through the door of our house, I kind of think it would change my priorities. I don't know that I'd be tuning into all the TV shows and spending my time the way I do. That's just me. But here's the thing. Jesus is here. He moved in. Because where you are, where I am, he's there. The question still stands. Who can live with God? Who can make their residence with him? I want to. I think you want to. Well, for the Jew in David's day, it had everything to do with effort. And we're going to see some specific kinds of things that make it possible for us to reside with God. But for us, there's only one thing that makes it possible for me to reside with God, and that is his grace. Now, because of his grace, there are things that I do and say. There are values that I carry. But I don't do and say those things so that God will let me live with him. I do and say them because God is residing in me. Theologically, that's probably the biggest bite out of the apple. And that's where I'm going to pause this morning. And I'll see you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.